sometimes poker hands don't go according to plan. Case in point.
We've got Queen 7 offsuit in the small blind. We've kicked up the blinds at 25-50. I raised to 200 to win the big blind a decent amount of the time. The big blind calls to spoil our plan. We're heads up. The flop comes Queen 8-4 rainbow. I bet 150. He calls. The turn is the deuce of diamonds. I bet 400 for value. He raises to 1600. I call for 1200 more. The river is the 7 of spades. I check. He goes with a giant sizing at 5600. I call. It turns out the river wasn't as good as we thought.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Wow. You hit the 3-outer.
Oh my god.
How much is it?
56.
That is gross.
Big blind calls to spoil our plan.
Alright guys, so let's break down this hand from Brad. I think a few things going on and they all kind of circle back to the difference between thinking about your hand and thinking about your range. So pre-flop, when we say that we're going to raise wider and Queen 7 offsuit isn't generally a small blind open, this implies we think our opponent is going to fold too much, and so he's going to defend tighter. That means we arrive to the flop with a wide range on our side and a tight range on his side. And range versus range, that's going to mean that you want to play a more passive strategy and check a lot and let the other guy take the lead. A bit unintuitive since we're used to having the betting lead when we raise small blind versus big blind. But this dynamic changes that. And if you don't acknowledge it, you end up giving the money that you stole pre-flop due to him being nitty back on the flop by betting too much with a weak range into a strong one. So that's kind of number one. Be that as it may, we make a c-bet, can't be wrong with Queen 7 on Queen 8-4, get called, turn the deuce, and here Brad says he thinks his hand is worth another bet, and this is another instance of focusing in on your hand rather than your range. And one of the things we teach you in Lab 2.0 is the general structure of betting strategies. So after you bet small on the flop, you get a brick turn. We're generally looking to catch up with our really big hands because everything bets small. We go for really big bets, and this 400 into 7 or 750 bet isn't part of the strategy. Now, you're not supposed to do it. Queen 7's supposed to check. You go more big, more polarized. That's kind of the structure you're playing within. And there are players against whom you can step out of the structure and say, you know, I'll just lead for the size that makes sense for my hand with Queen 7, specifically more passive opponents, and this doesn't seem to beat that type of player. On the contrary, it does look like this player's raise might even have been triggered by the fact that Brad chose this weak and face-up sizing. So that's a dangerous game to play. You have to know who you're playing it against, and that's another one of the things that we teach you to do in the lab. To me, betting this size with this hand should be a conscious exploit and not something I would ordinarily do. After getting raised, I agree Brad's hand is probably too strong to fold. And on the river, when he improves, it's really unfoldable. This is what's known as a value catcher on the river. So you actually beat some value bets, and so it is in theory unfoldable, barring a very extreme read, and that's kind of unlucky there. But yeah, that is my opinion and my thoughts on the hand. Hope you enjoyed it.
What does it mean when a hand doesn't go as planned? I think this is a very important subject and one that has to do with both poker and life. So let's say you have a date with a girl and you talk to her before, you really like her, you go on the date and suddenly, you were planning on going to the park. It's stormy weather, it's raining, it's starting to snow, there's thunder, there's lightning. That you are planning to go to the park, right? It was a beautiful day. You have your picnic basket, everything planned out. What do you do when things don't go as planned? Fairly simple. You change your plans, right? No going to the park. If you do go to the park as a date, it's not going to end well for you. This story is how poker works. So when a hand doesn't go as planned, the first and most important thing to do is to recognize, oh, this isn't going as planned. Let's slow down, let's reevaluate, let's consider my options, and let's understand that things are not going to pan out the way I thought. For example, you look down at pocket queens under the gun, and your plan is to raise and have an advantage and win a nice pot. And you do raise, and the guy on the cutoff 3-bets you, and now your plan is maybe to re-raise him back and start playing, but then the guy on the button re-raises him, and the guy on the small blind re-raises him, and you're like, oh wow, this isn't going as planned, right? Then suddenly you have to reevaluate your queens, and you realize, given the context of everything that happened, queens with every action shifted, right? So it started out being a top 2% hand and anyone can have anything. And then it was a 2% hand facing maybe an 8% 3-betting range. And then it was a 2% hand facing an 8% 3-betting range and a 3% cold 4-betting range. And now another cold 5-betting range added, which is probably like 1.5% of hands. And suddenly you're like, oh wow, queens is actually terrible here. This is a really easy fold. But you have to follow the weather, you have to follow the signs and kind of see as plans change. And the same is true for after the flop. So say the board comes king 5-6 and you have king jack or king queen or ace king. You make a bet and your opponent makes a big raise and puts a big bet in on the turn. It's very, very important that you re-evaluate how strong your hand is. And they're able to recognize at what point plans have changed, and rather than having a hand that wants a big pot, it's your opponent that's telegraphing a bigger pot than your hand is appropriate for, and folding suddenly becomes an option for you. So whenever things don't go as planned, the most important thing is slow down, reevaluate, consider all your options. And, there's always another hand. There's always another date with a girl. You're going to have good weather. It's fine to fold good hands in poker. That's part of the game.